Okay. So where we left off last time was trying to get, excuse me here a second. Where we left off last time was getting an Influx database instance set up. So this is probably really loud. Let me mute this real quick. Okay, so we left setting get an Influx instance set up. After a little bit of research and digging around here, it looks like the best solution to this is going to be to get a Docker container up and running for Influx. So let's close down some of these browser tabs we have here. Don't need all of this nonsense. Did close our Grafana. Let's make sure that that's back up and running like it's supposed to be. So our container didn't start back up. So let's get that going here. We got this command in here somewhere. Oh. So we already have this running. That's interesting. I guess we can just run it here. Let me think about this here. Yep. Okay. So let's start this container up. Let's go back over here. Just at least see if make sure that's up and running. Okay, so we can get here. I think the password's admin. No, it's not admin. What is that? Because I don't remember. Can I get an idea of what's going on here? So they keep moving my cheese too, by the way. So where's the chat at here? Okay, we were rocking and rolling here. Okay, let's see here. What is the password for this? So it should be admin. Did I change it? I probably did change it, didn't I? There you go. Okay. So our Grafana is back up and running. Let's save this so I don't have to remember it. And now we need to get an Influx instance kind of running here. So let me know how the stream's working in the chat if you're watching, so I kind of get an idea. Oh, there we go. Okay, So, please give me feedback in the chat and stuff. Sorry, it's been a while since I've looked at this. But I did do the research. So, we need to pull down the Influx Docker container. So let's just do a Docker pull Influx DB. We'll just grab the latest. Okay, we got that one. So, let's see here. Let's go to the official documentation because that's where we're going to need to go anyway. Okay. Yep. We can run it. Got to set a port as we expect. So let's get this done here. Let's try to find us a better example. Yeah, maybe we'll go with the first one here. Yeah. Just trying to find the simplest example here. So we've already pulled down. So, okay. I'm not too worried about doing a volume. So let's just do something similar to what we did before. So we'll do a D here. We'll do a name. We got our image. Okay. And then I know this is not 100% the best command. Okay, so this would run it, but we also know there's a web UI. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's run this and see if we can get connected here. Okay, so it's running. So let's curl this and see if we can create a database. Okay. So what should have returned? Can we do this? Can we insert a record into this database? I don't know. And we got back a 204, no content. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know if we got this or not. So let's figure out. So we got this this database here, and according to the information on the Docker Hub, we ran this, and we can just start creating stuff here. So I don't know, do we have a data source or not? Can we see data? So, easy thing to do, let's add a data source. Here in Grafana, let's select Influx. Influx, not TF'd. And then we'll, it is HTTP localhost 8086. So we'll just copy it from right here. I didn't want to open that, but it's easy enough. My DB. Save and test. Bad gateway 502. Okay, so that was it. That works. So we saved it. So let's add us a dashboard. See if we can pull some. There we go. Let's add a query. Let's do our influx here. I do not have any clue what data we have, but let's see if we can. What did we insert in here? We inserted CPU load. Host, region, value. So let's see here. Select field. It'd be just value, right? Yep. And our measurement's going to be CPU load from default where. Okay. So we're not seeing any data. We're not seeing any data. Sorry, everybody, I'm a little off tonight. We got our influx running. I'm going to get my head in the game here. So we have our influx running, just using the example on Docker Hub. And we've supposedly inserted some data. And then we wrote a record, which apparently the CPU load short shows up in the drop downs. So we did something right to that. So that's a good start. And we're really not going to be able to create a dashboard with Terraform And that's because it it's a JSON. So if we look here, the Terraform provider for Grafana, which let's reload, we can see here dashboard. That requires a JSON file, right? So we kind of have to have a dashboard or a template for a dashboard to create a new dashboard. So it might be good for doing a backup and exporting out your dashboards to code and then stuff, but you'd have that stuff in the database anyway, right? So, and you'd have it backed up. So really what I'm going to focus on is setting up an instance and like putting in a data source. So I think we kind of have that worked out right now. So let's test it and see if when we're trying to build a dashboard, if the data gets pulled in or doesn't get pulled in like I thought it would. Okay, so a data source for this, just going to look like this right here. And this is as good of an example as any here. So let's copy that. Go back to our main. So we got a folder that we created last time. Let's add in here. We're going to call this Influx. Actually, let's give it something meaningful. MyDB, since that's what we call the database. Type's going to be Influx. The name's going to be MyDB. And then we know this is going to be a local host. And let's look at what's on this, because I connected with a browser. So I don't know what they're going to support here. Name, type, URL, it's optional, right? Access mode. So their example shows CloudWatch, JSON data. Their Grafana shows a username, password. Let's go back to here to the data source we created. Discard the dashboard. Our access is browser. You have server. Okay. Password says it's configured. Don't have a clue what that means. So I wonder how we set this access to browser here. Maybe we can't. Maybe we can't from here. But let's go back and look here. Let's see. Username, password required by some data sources. So it's not required. That's good. And then access mode. The default is proxy. And this is access mode. So we know. I bet you that's server. So that's the server based. The default. So I don't know what optional. I don't know what values are allowed for access mode. So this will be something we'll need to learn. So we know proxy is server by default. So let's roll. Let's roll with this. Let's just roll the way it is. And they're pulling in the database name from terraformed Influx. So we probably could have terraformed our Influx database. And maybe I'll do that part of this blog post. Like I'm still trying to figure this out. But let's see if this runs. Right. Let's just jump in. Let's clear this, and then let me turn off this sound here. Okay, and then so let's Terraform plan. Let's see what it says. It says it's going to add one thing, right? We already got our thing, our folder that we was going to create, and now we're going to create a data source. So let's just see if it works. By default, the access mode is going to be proxy, right? That's what it said, which I bet you if I go look, I'll have that data source in my Grafana now. And there it is. And the access mode is server default. So proxy equals server default. So let me make a note here. Okay, that's not working. So let's HCO here, and then let's make a note. Access mode for Influx database, InfluxDB is proxy by default, which means server default. Okay. So I have that. So what I really want though is I want it to be set up the same way as I did this example. So let's see if I can set browser as an option, because in the drop down here, I want it to be browser. So let's figure that out. We know we can remove these two. We don't need that. And then we can set access mode, and then we can just do browser. Now, I don't know if that's going to work or not. Actually, let's not delete. Let's not delete this stuff right now. We don't want too many things to show up here when we go to plan. Okay, so we got that. Quick tip here, you could manually format this as you go, but if you type in Terraform FMT, we click it back up here, this should have formatted this, which I think is interesting, that it's not refreshed. It's interesting. It said it made the change. So what FMT should have done was that. Oh, look. There you go. It just didn't load it. Okay, so let's run our plan, and then I have a good idea of what access mode means. And it says it's going to do it. We'll see. Let's see if it actually does it. And this is a valuable lesson right here about Terraform. Is sometimes the documentation's not always clear about what you need to do and what that's going to look like. So you have to kind of experiment around with it and kind of make the assumption about what it's doing and what it's not doing with what's going on. So, like for example here, I knew access mode equated to access in the UI, but it's server default, whereas Terraform's using the nomenclature proxy. Now, older versions of Grafana, when this provider was probably made, may have used the word proxy, or the API that's exposed for Grafana uses the term proxy, but it's not what shows up in the UI. So sometimes that makes it really challenging to map what's happening in the GUI to what you need to do in Terraform. So this is common with Azure and AWS. They call things weird things in the portal or in the console, and you have to figure out what that means in Terraform. And usually in Terraform, there's a lot more levers and things you have to set than you normally would have to when using the console or the CLI or whatever, because it knows just to do that by default because their developers wrote it. So they know to set those things to default behaviors or whatnot. So this says this applied. So let's go see if that's changed to be what I want it to be. And it's not. So that's interesting. Let's see what it did here. It is not changed. So let's go read the help file. So what does browser access mode? So let's look up the Grafana API. Or we very well, what does this expect? Access proxy. What are values that are acceptable? These are all proxies. Which is really probably the right way to do it. I'm not gonna lie. So I can't see here. So the next option is we'll just go read some source code. So that's another thing that I do when I'm writing these blog posts, or I'm trying to figure out something, or even when I'm doing my job, when I'm trying to figure out something about Terraform, what I end up doing is having to go jump into the source code and read it. So let's see what options I can have, and maybe it doesn't know. Maybe it's a string, and I'm chasing my tail here. So we're inside here. These are almost all laid out the same way. So we'll just go in here to the Grafana folder, and then we'll go look at the resource for data source. And let's see what it kind of says here. So schema, name. So all Terraform providers or Terraform objects like resources have a schema defined in Go, right? This is written in Golang. And you can typically go in here and read it and see what they expect for options. So this is perfectly fine. Access mode. It is a schema type of string, of course, right? It's optional, and the default is proxy. So we may be searching beyond here to figure this out. So that's going to be an interesting thing. So we're going to have to do some searching here. These are all examples. Well, we can also go to Grafana's GitHub, and we'll just go dig around in there. I'm sure there's some doc I could find with this in here, but this is a little bit more fun, right? So I think most of the stuff should be here. Package, API, data sources, and here we go. Access comes from, so what are, let's go back up here to what we're looking for. Access. So it's coming from models.datasource. So I don't know if there's any kind of validations going to be in here. But we'll go up. We got a models folder underneath the package. We do. here's data source. Let's see what it pulls in. Components. These are all your constants for your data sources. So this is kind of interesting look behind the scenes. And access is of type DS access. So is there a model for that? I didn't see one back here. But where would it be pulling that in from? So now we're starting to stretch the limits of what I know about Go. I think it's going to have to be... Okay, so DS access is a string. So now we don't really kind of know. Okay. So we are going to have to let's Docker exec IT into the Grafana container. Oh, it's right. It's exec Grafana bash. Is that gonna work? There we go. Okay, so we're in here, and we're going to know that. Second conf. It's not bin, I don't think. Yeah, there you go. Actually, I know it's var lib grafana. There you go. So what I did is I just execed into the Grafana container using Docker exec, and then I know it stores the database in var lib grafana, and you can see right here is the SQLite database for grafana.db. So the next step we're going to have to do is we're going to have to log into a SQLite database, and we'll just try to find what we need to know that way. We'll just poke around in there. I have no clue. This would have probably been easier to have local, by all means. But we got it in the container now. So let's should be able to type SQLite. Grafana DB. No. Oh. No. Nah. It should have SQLite installed on here, right? So what do we need to do here? See if we got SQLite installed. Okay. So let's pivot again. So we're here at the page for the APIs, but they're not giving us what are all valid types are for these data sources. So there's no, I don't think there's any references for these. Grafana API schema. I don't know at this point. Back to the same, and we don't have this information here. So, let's look. We got the. Hold on, I'm not going to give up on this. GitHub Grafana. Is there a schema that's pre-populating this table in the source code here? I have no clue where that's going to be. Scripts maybe. Nope, not the kind of scripts that I'm looking for. Do we have anybody that may here. So if anybody on the chat here has got any idea of where I should look, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to, provisioning. I found it. Dashboards, data sources. So here we go. Access mode can either be proxy or direct. Okay, so we took the long way around here to find this, but we found it. So here's a good note, and I'm going to write this down. This can be a pull request to Terraform to add the access of proxy or direct. Okay, and there's two people hanging out on here, so why not let's just take this detour and we'll roll with it. Right, let me grab me a drink here. I'm going to mute real quick. Okay, so this is the detour. So if you look here, they don't have the types. They just say the default is proxy, right? If you look at other providers like, let's just jump back to the provider list here. And we go to the one I know that I work with the most, which is Azure. And then we jump down to, I don't know, database resources. I think just choose the MySQL database. That's good enough as any. You'll see here that some of them, well, this is probably not the best one, but you'll see here like, oh, this is a char set. It needs to be one of the valid MySQL char sets or collations, or let's just do SQL database. It'll tell you what are, except like here, create mode. Well, your options are default, copy, etc., etc. And then it says what it defaults to, and they're highlighted a special way. So a PR that would be easy to do would be to jump in here to the Terraform documentation and highlight this the same way and list out what the default values are. And now that we've went and looked at the migrations, we kind of know that direct is the default value that I think we're looking for. So let's go plug this in and let's see if that gives us a different output. So now let's exit our container we exec into. Let's do a Terraform apply. Yes, we want to make this change. Now let's go back to our UI and let's see if the change actually took. So let's go back to data sources. Oh, right there. See, now it's a browser. So if we'd learned anything here, we learned that Um, server equals proxy, browser equals direct. And so the difference here is that server means you're going to proxy through the Grafana server to make the call, which means cores is not going to come into play here. Direct means you're going to go through the browser from the JavaScript here in the browser to make the call to get the data, which means that cores will come into play if they're not the same host. Now, I'm totally avoiding that because it's localhost here and localhost there. I would have to learn a lot more about Influx than I know right now, and spend a little bit more time with it to know all the little ins and outs and how to set it up and work with it best. But I didn't want to do a lot of that legwork and prep, other than just doing some research here for this one, because I want this to kind of be more raw and real, right? Because if I spend a lot of time prepping for this and planning it out, then you are not getting the real benefit of watching somebody do this, right? At least that's my opinion. If you don't like that approach, let me know in the chat. If you'd like it to be a little bit more, planned out. But that's not what my goal was. And I lost a few people because I got off to a slow start. So I'm glad some people stuck with me. Okay, so that works. We got this data source up and running. Let's see if we can make a query, and let's see if we can get some stuff showing up here. So this isn't working, and that's fine. We got an error. It's failed to fetch, but we know that our other one worked, right? So I'm not doing something right. This one's admin. I don't even know what this password is here. So it's configured. I don't know what the default. I don't even know if there is. I don't even know if there are some. Like, I really don't know. But I know the data source we created doesn't work, right? So back to having a working blog post example. I'm going to want to I don't know. So we're back to reading about authentication now, right? Because we're going to set this up. So by default, authentication is disabled. So there's no auth here. So I don't guess it really matters. Like, this should just be working. So let's see it again. Let's see what's different. So, and this will be the workflow with Terraform and things you don't know. Is you spend a lot of time creating it? Did it work? Is it configured the way I wanted it to? Nope. Destroy it, recreate it. And if you're trying to start from a resource that already exists, then you can just run plan, and then you'll see like, oh, you need to make change. It's going to make changes if you ran it, which tells you that your configuration in Terraform doesn't match what your configuration needs to be, or what your existing configuration actually is. So that's when you'll have to just slowly go through it. And some things are going to be forced upon your resources, not necessarily in this case, but like with Azure, and you're using Azure DevOps, when you're publishing an app service from Azure DevOps, it sets a lot of source control configs and settings and stuff like that. Those will always want to change because you don't have those in your Terraform. So what you can do is just tell it to ignore those subsettings for changes. So that way it doesn't care and it doesn't complain, because it'll just add them if they don't exist from Azure DevOps. But you don't want to necessarily put that in your Terraform, right? Because your pipelines could change, the keys could change, and all that stuff. So you don't, that's not a concern of Terraform. So something to keep in mind. Now, if you went down the road of using Terraform to create your data sources, and you're going to push passwords in, then you probably want to update your passwords from Terraform too, right? Just to keep it consistent and keep the state in sync. So that's going to be something to bear in mind down the road here for this too. Okay, so I don't know what's different. We got to figure it out. Here, so it says passwords configured. I have no clue. Basic auth, credentials. Let's open up another tab here and see if we can compare. Browser, no auths. User is not admin. So if I save and test this, nope, failed. If I change this to admin, what's going to happen? Okay, so it's expecting the username to be admin. Now, I changed this here in the GUI, right? And we talked about that. So I did change this here. So if I were to, hold on, let's undo that here, right? So if I were to run a Terraform plan, this is going to tell me now that username doesn't match, right? Password stayed the same. We know password can be blank, right? Or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. So what we need to do is we need to update our username to be admin. And then when we go to plan, no changes need to be made. So now, to test this all out, we should do a Terraform destroy. And delete it all. So if we go back here and we go back, it's not there like expected. Let's apply it. And say, yes, we're going to create two. So we're creating our folder. We never deleted the folder, right? And we got the data source working. Refresh. Data source should be there. If we go here, we say test. Failed to fetch. Very interesting why that failed to fetch, but it worked when I edited it here. So let's see. So not doing something right. Okay. So here, I figured out what it is. Just a hunch. Right? It's this trailing slash. Bet money. Go back here, we'll refresh, load everything fresh. Bam. There you go. So now we have a working data source, right? So what I can do here is we now know this is what we need. We're going to create. And then we can hop back over to our blog post we're working on. Of course, I need to change the title of this now, right? I need to do a lot of other legwork. But there you go. This is what we're going to do. So proxy, which means server default. We want to use the browser access mode, which is keyed as default. As direct. And then username needs to be set as admin. And the example. So we're just going to, set it to random. So we could pull in the random provider and we'll randomly generate one here. And so how you would go about doing that is Terraform random provider, right? It's a provider, random. And we'll just do a random password, right? Because we can. So we just need to say source random password. Let's see we don't need a special characters, right? And we don't. That'll work. We just special. No, we don't want any special characters, right? Because that's not very fun, is it? So what I would do to add that in here is that, and then let's just do 10 characters. Special is going to be false, and then we don't need any override specials. And then let's go up here. We have to add a provider. Random, right? We don't have any configuration unless we want to pin it to a specific version, which is generally a good practice. We're not going to do it. And then here we can just do random password.password. Now if we go here and we go Terraform plan, we don't have that installed, so what we should have done was do a Terraform init. And then we'll do a Terraform plan. We'll get it back. So random password.password is something with multiple attributes. So we should have did random password.result. So that's me getting a little excited and ahead of myself. So now if we plan it, it should be clean. And we'll do a Terraform apply, and then we're not going to sit through me approving it again. This right here, for the people that are still watching, kind of bad. So finding this case used often when you're doing CI/CD, but generally you just don't run commands that way. Always apply, read the plan, approve. Because when you run apply, it generates a plan. Or you supply a plan that's already pre-generated that will tell you if something has changed from what you expected to happen between when you initially created the template and if somebody went into production and changed the value. That doesn't need to be overwritten. Like say they go fix a bug in the 45 minutes you're working on something, and then you just run apply thinking it's going to be good, but something changed and it changed back. So if you're running things manually, that's no go. Okay. So now let's double check to make sure that we didn't break anything. Doesn't use the password anyway, so it doesn't matter. But no, we did not break it. So before I get ahead of myself, let's create a dashboard. Let's go quick query. Let's pick my DB. Let's make sure we get some stuff showing up. CPU load short, which is the value that I seeded it with, shows up. So my data source actually works. So at this point, what we started in the last video and what I set out to do here is now we have to run an Influx instance. We have to seed it with some data. We have to seed it with this database, my DB, with the same data. So my blog post makes sense. So now I need to go collect all these commands that I've been running, right? And kind of start laying it out. So I know that this right here is going to be what my end result looks like. So I will paste that into my blog post, because typically at the bottom of my blog post, I like to do the whole thing. So everything that was created. And then I'll make a few more notes here. Generate a password. So we got this, we got our ideas, we know what we want to do, add this provider. Down here somewhere, I'm going to build this up slowly, right? So that to the data source, so this to the data source. And then we actually need a random password here. So I'll put in here, section about the random password. We need to do a little different, was we need like infrastructure set up if you're going to run this. So I need an infrastructure setup section, right? And this is where we install, we run a Grafana container instance and an Influx DB instance. And these are bash, and we can go here and find the ones we executed. I did run this command to seed some data. So let's put down here seed influx data. Then again, that's bash. We also created a database, right? Sometimes I like to copy the outputs. So what I very well could do after this, when I go to finish it up, is go back and rerun all these things from scratch, verify that it works again, and then copy out any output that I think's relevant. Like some of these curl responses were just like, oh yeah, I got back at 204, no content. Well, that's not interesting. But if there was outputs from like running these Terraform commands, then I may copy some of those. I'll abbreviate them. But like if I want to illustrate that, oh, there's going to be 4 changes, or there's going to be 5 changes, or there's 2 changes, then I'll typically grab that section and put that in my blog posts. Because I'm trying to set up the expectation. While that text may change, readers kind of need to know when they run a command, like, this is the output I expect to see. Because sometimes you run a command, like I was running these curl commands, right, getting back to 204. I didn't know if that was the right thing or not the right thing that I needed to be getting back or seeing. So, I had to factor that in and realize whether I could do that or not do that. Okay, so we got that, and we need to get our bash commands. Our infrastructure commands here for the containers. So let's keep going. I'm getting close. Right. So this one right here. If we just did Docker run as is, that's going to pull it for you automatically. You can pull it ahead of time. So I would probably personally make a note about that. Right. And then there's my Grafana one. Look at that. So we're going to run these containers. Need to put in here, create our API key in Grafana. So I will probably link to docs and a screenshot, and I will probably tell you the path where you had to go to do it. So that'll be kind of like what I do there. And then I think that's it. Like, this is the bones of a blog post. The title needs some work, so now I'm not terraforming your Grafana dashboards, right? So I've kind of bunked that myth there that you could do that, because for anybody that's not been here from the start, Grafana dashboards are basically just sending JSON to to Grafana, which means that you can't really build the dashboard in Terraform, right? Uh, if you watch the last stream, you can, but let's be real, you're not really going to. So, creating data sources and managing those types of things, folders and stuff like that, probably makes way more sense. Organizations than dashboards. That's my opinion. So what's the utility here? If I can't build dashboards in HCL, and I have to build them in JSON, I would use this, but it's not going to be as useful. So, of course, I didn't know what to expect going into this, right? So the only times I really, besides doing a little bit of research on Influx, the only time I've really looked at the problem beyond just this would be a cool blog post to do and something I want to do in my job, I didn't do any research ahead of time. So I've learned now that the Grafana Terraform provider is cool, but doesn't necessarily have like the utility or the function that I necessarily am looking for. It would be good potentially to have as a backup, because you can export out all your dashboards and then have your data sources set up in Terraform, so you could create another instance if you needed to, like you had a failure or whatnot. But it kind of is what it is. So that out of the way, I know what I want my post to be. So this title, like I said, was a working title. And when I got into this, it kind of changed, right? Because there's nothing interesting you can do with Grafana by itself. Create orgs and folders, like that's not exciting. Adding a data source, like a little bit more exciting. And you had to have a data source to add. So Influx. And of course, as I said in another video, I wanted to learn more about Influx, and I have. I've learned that I need to learn a lot more about Influx than just executing some curl commands in a very insecure way against this example. But the highlight of the post is probably more Grafana, not Influx. So while I was trying to give you in the last post in the last video talking about having production ready like blog post, I don't feel so bad about Influx side of not being like as bulletproof, because the highlight of the post still is Grafana. Now, there is a Terraform provider for Influx, I believe. So maybe I did this post all the wrong way. Maybe I should have stood up an instance of Influx and created my example data with Terraform. And maybe that's what I do. Maybe I create my DB instead of giving curl commands. I'll create it here with the Terraform. Okay, hey, you know what? Username's optional, right here. Username optional. So there you go. So you don't even have to have username and password. You can skip SSL. Okay, so this should be simple. So heck, let's for giggles here, let's do this. You got me all ramped up now. Like I should have done this from the start. Okay, so and if you got any questions in the chat or anything you want to know about what we're talking about, then let me know. There's that. Username is optional, so let's remove that. Now remember, the trailing slash in Grafana is not needed, but I got a feeling the trailing slash here will be needed in the Terraform provider. So make sure you add it. Let's just call us awesome app. Let's get at this here. So, not what I wanted to do. Down here, let's clear this all out. Let's terraform a init because we added a new provider. And let's terraform plan, and it should tell us, hey, I can connect. And we're gonna create one of these bad boys. Yes. Okay. So terraform, apply. M 14. Well, it doesn't like that. What doesn't it like about this? Did I? Doesn't like something I typed here. Okay. So another tip. Sometimes the Terraform examples are wrong. Not saying this one's wrong, but sometimes they can be. So always go to the resource, check it out. Influx DB database name is required. If you make a retention policies block, then there's required stuff. So I don't know. Does anybody see what I've typoed here? So we're going to validate. Let's see. Didn't like something, so I don't know what I did wrong. Well, here's what I get for flying off the cuff. And yet again, we're looking to my blogging process. I come to the conclusion that I don't know what's wrong here. So back to Grafana is the focus of the blog post. Influx is not. So while this would have been cool to do, I really don't see what the typo is, and I don't want to chase it down. That is such a weird list. I can't let it go. Okay, so something's invalid here. Provider error. Don't tell me this is going to be the same. Let's try it. I'm not going to give up just yet. You all get to see me struggle here. Go back to the provider. Username. Optional, but not optional. Let's see. See if we get the same results we do now from like what we did with Grafana. Nope, same one. Okay, so this is a bad detour. Okay. So I kind of have the basic sections laid out. I know how I want to build. and I have my final working solution. So at this point, we can fire up Get Cracking here, and I'll commit the code. I commit my post. I keep in a feature branch called posts. So you'll see here. It's for something else I'm doing. So here you go. I don't save the main.tf as part of my blog post. I don't put that in get source control. The reason why is if I lose this machine, most of the time, then I have my blog post to refer back to. If I delete it, I should be able to recreate it from my blog post. If I can't recreate it from my blog post, then my post isn't very useful in lots of ways, right? At least in my opinion, because you can't use it to make something that works. So I dog food it that way, that if I go on a different machine and try it, or I try to stand it up. So like, for example, I'm working here on the laptop, streaming on my Intel NUC. I will probably pull this post down and run through it again on my NUC, clean machine, just because I want to walk through any issues or errors, double check to make sure that it works. Like the fact that I'm using curl, I will probably make a note that you need to install curl or use Postman or something else. Like that's always a good thing to give people alternatives. I'm doing a lot of this on Linux. Doesn't really matter what you do it on. It should all work the same. Especially because it's containers, right? And Terraform's available for all major platforms. Actually for a lot of platforms. So typically I don't worry about committing that anywhere. So we basically just need to make a commit. So I have a full working example and all the commands that I need to recreate this. And so I'm going to call the stream right now. So for those that have stuck around, or anybody watching this after the fact, you please subscribe. I'm going to try to do these once a week, probably Tuesdays or Thursdays. That might change a little bit. And so this post probably will come out sometime next week. I'm going to try to finish it up. I'm not going to have you all watch me write and stuff at this point. You kind of see my process of building out the bones, and the rest of it's just making words. Not trying to downplay the writing part because you have to make a story out of it. So maybe I may do another one, just like what the final editing process looks like, what tools I use there. I typically run it through some type of checker like Grammarly. Microsoft now has their own version called, what is it called? Editor. What is it? Takes on new editor extension. So that require me to post it in Office 365 or Office Online. I typically use Grammarly. I know there's lots of concerns about like ownership and things like that. All this stuff's going to be Creative Commons. They can go scan it, do whatever they want to with it anyway. So I'm not super worried about it. With my blog post, like they don't own your content. If you read their terms of service, they're very clear about that. Now they may, use it to feed their engine and things like that. But, and typically I try to shoot for 7th to 9th grade reading level with my blog posts. I know the people that are reading it are probably not that reading level. But the average reading level in the United States is somewhere in that ballpark. So it's a lot more consumable and approachable, and especially if people are trying to read this really quick while they're doing their job, they don't want to read something like too hard to comprehend that requires 100% of the focus. So that's why I try to do what I do when I lay it out and stuff. And sometimes they tell me if my stuff's not engaging. So, you set up your own criteria in Grammarly about what you want your post to kind of read like. Another thing that I do with my post is I use kind of like the Microsoft is it voice? What is it? I know I'm giving a lot of Microsoft. So Microsoft has a style guide for how they think things should be written. And a lot of their stuff's about accessibility and term usage. What I like is the write like you speak. So use contractions. So contractions are friendlier. Coming from a science background like I do, that's kind of frowned upon, being as personable and not trying to be very formal in certain parts of the stuff. Like this informal friendliness is supposed to be more like in your discussion, not in some of your other part of your writing. So that's a habit I've had to break. But it's good because you want to write like you speak, and you want to use contractions because contractions are generally seen as being friendlier. And you can see that on something like Grammarly between not having contractions versus using contractions. Using we, so I use the word we a lot to kind of pull us together. So like we are sitting here working on this blog post together, which makes you feel more of a part of it. I know right now not a lot of people are chatting, so it's a little bit more passive, but hopefully people will get more comfortable with me and they'll start chatting more and asking questions as we go. Get to the point fast, so I try not to, like, while I beat around the bush while I'm talking to you all here sometimes about getting ideas out. I try to keep on point with my blog posts. And typically I am brief. While we've live streamed here 2 hours, and I've done about 30 minutes of research outside of that, so 2.5 hours. It'd probably be 3 to 5 hours to write this post once I'm done. Some posts maybe take me 30 minutes to an hour if I know if it's a problem I solved. Working on personal stuff for something I'm doing at work, then that can go pretty quick. And then so being brief part comes out in your writing if you try to, like, I've done all this initial work and research, right? So now I can trim down what I've done and make a post out of it that's coherent and brief and to the point, because I've went around the block a couple times with these concepts, like me trying to pull in that Influx provider and use it. The idea just hit me. So that's a rabbit that I chased that didn't pan out, but I could have free flowed that in writing, but that's not very useful, right? So don't capitalize certain things. Punctuation. They're big on having the comma. So what that's, Oxford comma. They don't like using two spaces. They don't like putting spaces in between certain things. So, I think Grammarly feeds into a lot of the same things. And then I think DigitalOcean. I think DigitalOcean has technical writing guidelines. So they got their style and structure. So if so you can actually submit to DigitalOcean to write for them docs and topics. Now it's typically Linux and Python focused. So just know that that's out there. I don't know if they're still doing that. GitLab does that too if you want to write a blog post for them. They all have writing guidelines, and so that's something you can just grab and use. So, like, they have their style. And believe it or not, their style is going to be not all that different. Friendly but formal. Technically detailed and correct. So what's like friendly and formal? So so they don't like using first person. So that's something that's different. They encourage you to use the second person. So you say you will do it, not I did it or I am doing it. It's you. That's something that I do to keep focus on, like it says here, you as the reader or as you as the watcher of this. And then they have a structure. So this is something I could probably do better at in my blog post is introduction and then the goal, like what you're going to learn. But typically it's not so long that the goal is kind of like what the title is in most of the stuff that I end up writing. And then they got templates here. So if you're getting into blogging more or trying to find your style or the thing you like to do, then this is a good reference because there's tons of these writing styles out here for different people. And I hear like this, become an author. You can write for this. So you can get paid and also have money go toward a tech-focused charity. So if you want to write and, $300. So that's not bad to write an article. First couple are going to be your tutorials here. So first couple of these are going to be a lot of work. But if you do it enough, if you're hone your blogging and this is something you wanted to do, then you could, generate a little extra income this way. If it's something they're interested in and they want to get out there, updates still pay pretty well if it's something that's a good sizable update. So this is something to keep in mind. I know, David, that, if you're still here, you do a lot of stuff on the side. Like this is something you could add in there. And GitLab is the same way. They have this stuff in guidelines. So anyway, kind of a side note, but something I thought worth pointing out. So at this point, I'm going to wrap it up. If you like what's going on here, subscribe. Like I said, I want to keep trying to do it. Also, if you like what I'm doing and you want to buy me a coffee, the buy me a coffee link is in the video description. And I don't have any like reoccurring things set up on Buy Me a Coffee. They offer that now. But I'm still kind of filling this out and exploring it. So hopefully you found this useful. Drop me a comment. I try to respond to those. You can find me on Twitter. phillipsj.net's my website, so you can go there. And it's got links to my LinkedIn, my Twitter, my GitHub, where the blog code actually lives. So you can always see kind of what I'm working on if you go and look at old feature branches that I've not necessarily cleaned up or new ones that I'm starting. I'll always do a pull request to pull in my work, so you can go review those too and kind of see like what I do and how I push them in. So thanks for joining me. I'm going to call it a night. Expect to see this post in probably a week. Talk to y'all later.